leading the way. First panel will be Women Leading the Way, followed by Women Striking for Success. Both panels are full of inspirational women and activists. If you have any questions for our panelists, please put them into the question and answer box, and you will be invited at the end of each panel to ask your questions. Please note that we cannot take questions from the comments box. Thank you. We will try to invite as many of you as possible to ask your questions. Our first four panelists are Frances O'Grady, Rehana Azam, Tracy Brabin, and Louise Regan, all leading women in our movement. They will each introduce themselves and share their thoughts about women leading the way. So welcome, and a massive welcome to our first speaker, Frances O'Grady. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine, and thanks for all the work that you do, not just with the TUC Midlands Women's Committee, but I know that you have been campaigning for many years against homelessness, against poverty, and for a decent life for everyone. So thank you for all of that. I have to say, it is just brilliant to be on a panel of such amazing women, this one and the next one. And also, I think we should acknowledge Lee and Rob from the Midlands TUC. They're the kinds of men who stand by women rather than, you know, in front of them, blocking all the lights. So thanks for all their work in organising this. I'm really aware that we are in a virtual room full of modern day Mary Macarthurs and Julia Varley's, the women who supported the Chainmakers in their strike for justice. And I had the honour of addressing the launch of the exhibition for the Chainmakers earlier this year. And it's an incredible story. And I know that those Chainmakers would want us to focus on the now and how we advance the interests of working women today. But I can't, given we've got Tracy on the panel especially, I can't not just mention Batley and Spen and the fantastic, amazing, brave, bold, brilliant Kim, who won that seat. You know, a lot of us may have seen that little bit of film of Kim and the team being harassed in the street. And, you know, I think all of us would agree that everybody has the right to dissent, everybody has the right to democratic debate, of course they do, but we do not live in Gilead, and it is not acceptable to go around harassing women, whether that's on the street, whether it's in the home, or whether it's at work. Too many women have to put up with that rubbish, and we're not going to take it anymore. We're going to organise and fight for the right to be respected and take our rightful place in our trade unions and in public life. So anyway, I'm very proud that we are part of a trade union movement that is growing, now 6.6 million. We have been growing for the last 4 years in a row. And also, sisters, just in case you hadn't heard this, we are now 57% membership women. So this is a women's movement as well as a men's movement, and we need women at every level of leadership. And I would encourage you to take part, if you haven't already, in the TUC women's leadership training, which I think gives us all that kind of much needed boost and support. But the fact is, thousands of people, especially women, have been turning to unions through the pandemic, worried about their jobs, worried about safety. And frankly, we've seen what's happened on the equality front with it being assumed that women are going to do all the homeschooling, that women will have to cut their hours and therefore lose their income, and that women can somehow manage on those insecure contracts. So we all know that COVID didn't invent inequality. It was there long, long before the pandemic, but it has certainly made it a whole lot worse. And that through that pandemic, it's women who have been on the front line at work and at home. Our economy would not be working if it were not for women. Think about all those women who kept our shops open, who've cleaned our workplaces, who've cared for us in the NHS, and critically, who have looked after our loved ones through the care system. And it still makes me really, really angry that multi-million-pound contracts were handed out to government mates, and yet still women in the care system in particular were failed on PPE. So much for the protective ring, so much for thanking our carers. They were failed, and that needs to be recognised. And not only that, they're not only failed, they're expected not even to be rewarded properly for their labour. And if there's one message I want to send to the government today, it's forget your pay freezes, forget your 1% cap on the NHS. Key workers, all workers, deserve a real pay increase. And I just want to end with this, Catherine. We are fighting for a new deal for working people, and that has to include a new deal for women workers. And that is about safety and security at work. It cannot be right that Black and ethnic minority women are twice as likely to be on a 0 hours contract as white men. It's got to be about positive flexibility, whether that's flexi time or shift swaps, and including that right to switch off, pull out that plug from the technology in terms of working from home. It's got to be about fair pay and equal pay. So stick that pay freeze where the sun don't shine. And it's got to be about the right to dignity and a trade union voice at work. We know the government has come back for us for that so-called unfinished business from the Trade Union Act. I mean, frankly, it's pathetic trying to tie unions up in red tape and charge us for the privilege, or charge our members for the privilege. And it's pathetic, especially when you look across the Atlantic at what Biden has done, you know, saying that the growth of trade unions, stronger union organisation is absolutely critical to the more equal, fairer economy that he is determined to build. So whatever our race, whatever our religion, our background, or our gender, let's remember everyone has the right to decency and dignity at work. And if we stay strong, if we stick together, then together we will win. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frances. That was an absolutely awesome opening speech. Thank you. It's my greatest pleasure to introduce our next panelist, Rehana Azim. Good morning, Rehana. Thank you.
Good morning, Catherine, and good morning, everybody. And it's great to be on a platform with such amazing, courageous women. I really do feel very humbled to be asked to join you all today. And what a shame we are not all in Cradley Heath in person watching the enactment of the great 10-week strike. The courage of the striking Cradley Heath chainmakers, amazing women whose solidarity and working power led them to improve their pay rates. We can't be there in person, but we're there in spirit and sisterhood. And you know, this year's International Women's Day theme was Choose to Challenge, a legacy passed on by the striking Cradley Heath chainmakers. They chose to challenge their employers and won. But let me start by saying that choosing to challenge is often a choice. Very often, choosing to challenge isn't often a choice. Very often we are left with little option but to push back. And where we have solidarity, it's much easier to carry on down this challenging path. I look back to my own introduction into the world of trade union activism. In my early 20s, working in a factory, my employer wanted to bring in a new payment system and no one was willing to take our concerns to the manager. Yet through collective solidarity and the faith of a few hundred women, I stepped up and became a union rep. and collectively we fought against the introduction of a new payment system, which would have cut our bonus rates. And back then, we earned less than the minimum wage. So the bonus system was all we had to supplement our miserable wages. And like all of you, I've spent most of my life challenging employers. And you know, sometimes that can be tiring. But when we offer our shoulders to lean on, supporting one another to give the best of ourselves to our great movement and activism, then together we achieve great things. I've gone from the factory floor to standing in an election for the General Secretary of the GMB a month ago. I didn't win, but at the same time, the solidarity I have felt and the fact that an Asian woman of my background actually made it on a ballot paper for a trade union election tells me what a win looks like. And whilst I mentioned trade union general secretary elections, I'm immensely proud that we got our first woman elected, Christina McInerney, elected in unison. And we all need to send much solidarity to Sharon Graham, the only woman standing for the Unite election, who has faced immense misogyny and trolling just because she has dared to stand. Often the onslaught of abuse starts simply because we have dared to put ourselves forward. And surely, as Frances says, we are better than that as a movement. If we as union sisters don't support each other to challenge these behaviours, how can we sincerely make a call to encourage more women to become active in our movement? And that's why mentors matter. And we need to constantly seek mentors out and look to mentor others, because it is in those times of doubt we need to be able to fall back on people we trust to keep us from losing our nerve. I'm exceptionally lucky that my mentor, the woman who was my union officer when I became a rep in a factory over 20 years ago, now retired, is still very much in my life. And Jackie never ceases to amaze me on how even today she invests in me and builds my confidence. And on my journey of activism, I've met some fantastic women. I met Louise Regan on the panel today in 2014 when I was helping to organise the People's March for the NHS. I met Lou in Nottingham, and when she and others led the march between Nottingham and Loughborough, and I still remember to this day, and I know Lou remembers it well, arriving in Nottingham after marching nearly a week and a half from Jarrow, really tired and just wanting to go home. And Lou and Chris just took me under their wings and filled me with the confidence that what we were doing to pull the country together, and how thousands of people across Nottingham was coming together to build support for our NHS. And I have to say, much solidarity. I know it's a rainy Saturday, but there are thousands taking part in NHS protests today, asking for patient safety, pay justice for NHS workers, and an end to NHS privatisation. And since I've become head of public services at GMB, we have more women national officers than we ever have. So many capable women across our movement are doing great work every day. We've got our first woman Metro Mayor, amazing Tracy, doing already in 6 weeks, great work. Our first woman TUC General Secretary, always amazing. And I know we all look to the day when we don't have to say we have our first woman in this or that position. You know, we are surrounded by leaders and bloody brilliant women. And I know our job is to be courageous in our leadership, but none of it matters unless we show that through deeds, not words. When the union movement finds us and takes us into its great embrace, our lives change forever. We should never forget what we can be collectively. And remember, we have always stood alongside the greatest women of our generation. Yet still today, we select our leaders often first by eliminating women, then minorities, and then those with too little education. Changing this takes time, but change we will. We just got to channel all of that shop steward leadership training and organising, and above all, raise one another up. Because after all, we are dealing with centuries of ingrained patriarchy, but we will continue to move forward. And though it's still often unrecognised or ignored altogether, through our labour and solidarity, we will all become who we can and will be. And I reckon no matter how long this rising takes place, there is now no turning back. So events like today is all about solidarity. Let's keep moving forward together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rehana, and thank you for joining us this morning. The next speaker is Tracy Brabin, and Tracy has been working so hard recently up in Batley and Spen, and also she is now our first female mayor. So thank you and good morning, Tracy.
Thank you so much for the invitation today. And honestly, how do you follow Rehana's speech? Because I feel quite moved by it. It's so inspirational. And also Frances, the way that she has fought for workers' rights and women's rights within the TUC. What phenomenal women. I am absolutely privileged to be on this panel. But I will also say, I feel really excited to be with this group of people, because it is, and other leaders will tell you, it is quite isolating when you're at the top of an organization, and to find solidarity with your colleagues and your trade union activist friends is very reassuring, and it feels like a great place to be. So that I wouldn't be anywhere else this morning but be here with you. I just want to say a few things about my own journey and about the trade union movement, being an MP and then being the first ever woman metro mayor in the country. So I'm a working class woman, grew up on a council estate, free school meal kid, first in my family to go to university, but all those opportunities were given to me because of Labour governments, whether that's social housing, whether that's DSS, when I first moved to London and I was vulnerable with no money, whether that's free libraries and a good education. And I took those values with me as I strove to be an actor in a career. I didn't know anybody. We had no family money. I didn't go to drama school. So it was pretty tough to get in and get on. But I never lost those values, and those values took me into the trade union movement. And as an equity rep, so as working in organizations, trying to get good paying conditions for actors. And then when I became a writer, a part of the Writers Guild, I was able to, one of my biggest campaigns, which I ran solely on my own, was to get 35 writers on Hollyoaks a pension from Line Pictures. And I'm sure there are many writers somewhere in the south of France on their boat somewhere, very grateful for the pension that I managed to get them. But only through solidarity can we make change. We have never been given anything as working people, have we? We've always had to fight for it. That's why I campaigned for striking miners. That's why I spent time at Greenham Common, because collective action and being a movement is a great place to be, because you're not isolated. And it is that power of that collective ambition that can make great change. So as an actor, when you're on the telly, it's helpful to political parties if you support them, because often they bring the press and, you know, bring a bit of media to events. So I spent decades going around the country supporting local councillors for election, MPs, and that's where I met Jo Cox. I grew up and was born and raised in Batley and Spen. I met Jo, absolutely thought she was amazing, worked with her campaigning to get her elected for MP. And then my passion for libraries was similar to hers. And we had a campaign to try and keep our library open in Batley. And then when she was murdered, her friends, who had become my friends from the GMB, when I said, what can I do? This is such a blow to democracy, and it's so heartbreaking for our community. What can I do? And some on this call will know the amazing Kath Pindo, who's the regional president of the GMB, who, if I have a mentor, Kath is definitely my mentor. And she said, do you want to be a member of parliament? So I would say to you, in life, it isn't about just making your own chances, but when an opportunity comes to you, that door is open. I think the only key in life is to walk through it, because the thing you will regret is the thing you don't do. So I said yes. There wasn't even a second thought. It was a horrible by-election when all the far right stood. I had 6 months of absolute imposter syndrome, because how could I possibly be as good as Jo? How could I possibly be, 1/10 of the MP that she was? People would see me and burst into tears because of the understanding that I'm only there because Jo has been murdered. So it was a tough 6 months. But then there was that snap general election, and I was able to go back to the people in Batley and Spen, say, this is what I've done in 6 months. This is my plan for the future. And I got a stonking majority. I think it was 55, not that I've remembered this, 55.5% of the vote. And I was on my way as the Member of Parliament. But I was also an advocate for devolution, because we all know, don't we, those decisions made by strangers in Whitehall and Westminster, they're made about us, without us, that we don't have any agency over that. They're not talking to us about what our needs are. So I've always said we need devolution. I'm an advocate for One Yorkshire. I think it's important to bring us all together. But when there was it finally got over the line, and I was looking around to find a woman I could get behind, because I was so angry that there was no, all the metro mayors, really powerful mayors around across the country, there were no women. And then it just dawned on me, actually, there comes a point when you have to stop waiting for others, and you have to stop waiting for permission to be allowed to do something. So I took a few soundings, and I decided to throw my hat into the ring. There were 3 of us in the selection. We went to members, and I was really, really grateful for the massive, overwhelming support I got from the trade union movement. I was selected as the candidate. We went to the public, 60% of the vote, and I'm the first ever woman Metro Mayor. And I would say that having money and power is a very strange experience for somebody who's been in opposition for the last 5 years. But I am absolutely determined to use my lived experience to change the lives for the better for women and girls across West Yorkshire. And one of the first things I did, Mark Bunce-Williamson has been the Police and Crime Commissioner for many years, and he's a very decent, hardworking man that's achieved a lot. But I did feel that it's time for a change and a shake-up. So in my first week, I invited Alison Lowe to be my deputy, and she is an ex-councillor in Leeds. She runs a massive mental health charity called Touchstone. She was the chair of the police and crime panel, but also she is a woman of colour. And I think her lived experience, and both of us are survivors of sexual violence, we can together make such a massive difference in that police and crime role. And one of my big manifesto commitments was to make the safety of women and girls at the heart of my police and crime plan. And working with Alison, it's going to have a massive impact. And in the second or third week, I made the announcement that we're going to bring buses back into public control. We're going to go on that journey, get money from government to improve buses now in an enhanced partnership. And then further on, we're going to investigate that public control, that franchising. And why? Because I know that buses are the choice for so many women, particularly when you have small children, when you're on a fixed income. My sister's a carer. I know how hard it is on a week-to-week basis. Parking for nurses, you're having to pay for parking, eroding into your salary, and also about safety of women on public transport. There's so much I want to achieve. But also, as Francis mentioned, it isn't just about just keeping women safe. It's also about pay, conditions, housing, about jobs for our young people, about bringing Sure Start back across West Yorkshire. Although I don't have the powers to do that, I'm working with councils to try and get that convening power and that persuasive power to support them to have that vision of early intervention being key. And when so many women were let go during the pandemic from work because they can't afford to square the circle because of their childcare costs. We know that childcare is also going to be something that's pivotal. So I just wanted to say that actually gender matters. Gender matters right at the very top, because my priorities from my own lived experience, I know where the gaps are. And I know that whilst we have some fine Labour leaders and fine Labour mayors, I'm not sure that they're always cognizant of that lived experience of being a woman and having a family and, you know, being ambitious or wanting to do well and get on. Just a few more words about the by-election. It has been interesting that when it looked like we were going to not win it, there were a lot of male journalists suddenly started to blame me and saying, well, if it wasn't for Tracy Brabin going for the mayor, Keir Starmer wouldn't be in this position. And honestly, I can't imagine they would say that to Andy Burnham. Andy Burnham left his seat in Lee, and Joe Platt lost it. You know, he couldn't help her keep it. So I just think it's so interesting what hyper criticism we often get when we step up. Anyway, I am delighted, and I worked alongside the campaigners in Batley and Spen, and they worked flat out, street by street, vote by vote, conversation by conversation to get Kim over the line. And she will be the most extraordinary MP for Batley and Spen. And while it's my hometown and I worked hard, and I hope I was a good MP for the region, I know that Kim's own experience and the work that she's done in her own right, she's not just Joe's sister, in her own right for the last 5 years, taking that horrendous tragedy and spinning it into more in common, spinning it into the Joe Cox Leadership Foundation and scheme. And during the pandemic, making sure that those who were isolated and lonely had food and friendship, and made such an impact in our community. And she was a fantastic candidate, and she'll be an amazing member of Parliament. But more than anything, I just want to encourage everybody that's on this call, if you have any instinct that you want to go into leadership or into a public life, it's just one little thing at a time. Join a trade union, get active in your trade union movement, speak up for those you work with. If it's you have an issue around your kids' school with speeding cars, get a petition going, start a campaign, get on the Parent and Teachers Association, step up, walk through that door, because I swear to you, I need more women around me. And I know that there's so many women on this call and watching that have got that talent. And we need your experience. We need your lived experience to inform our politics. So thanks so much for the invitation today, and have a great Saturday. And it's a privilege to be here.
Thank you so much, Tracy, for that wonderful speech. Thank you. It's my greatest pleasure now to introduce Louise Regan. Louise is also the chair of Midlands TUC. So good morning, Louise, and thank you for joining us.
Morning, Catherine. It's good to see you, and it's brilliant to be on this panel with such fantastic sisters and very hard speeches to follow. I have to say, it's been really interesting to hear from all our speakers so far, and I'm looking forward to the next panel as well, around women that are taking action. Just for people that don't know me, as Catherine has said, my name's Louise Regan. I'm chair of the regional TUC, but I'm also a national officer for the National Education Union. I work full time. I'm a primary teacher, have been for the past 32 years, and love doing the job, exhausting though it is. So I am slightly tired this morning. It's getting towards the end of term, so I'll try and stay alert. So I was just going to talk a little bit really about my journey and what it's like to be and has been like to be a woman trade unionist. So I joined the union when I was a student, when I was training to teach over 30 years ago, and very quickly became active in the union in my first school, started attending meetings. I have to say the meetings at that time were very male dominated, despite the fact that my union, the National Union of Teachers then, the National Education Union now, has always had a large majority of women. Around 3/4 of our members are women. And then I started going to our annual conference, which was a treat to behold. So, and I remember those early conferences. You would arrive, it would be full of men. The platform at the top just had what we then used to call grey suits, who sat there and told us what we needed to do. And you used to think none of these people actually do the job that I'm doing. So they're up there telling me what I should be doing, but actually don't do the job. They're people that have just sat in these positions for many years and block other people from getting into them. And also all of the speakers at conference, or the majority of the speakers, were men, because you used to have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go and queue up to put your speakers cards in. And many of us were there with young children. So, you know, you weren't going to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and leave your children or drag your children out of bed. So we had these very dull conferences with lots of the same men, I have to say, getting up to speak repeatedly. And we started talking as women that were attending the conferences about we wanted it to be different. And we'd meet every year when we went to conference and say the same things. And eventually we said, well, we can't keep just meeting and saying the same things. We have to choose to do something. And it sort of goes back to what Rehana says. You have to choose to challenge. You know, you can't just think that it will change without us doing something. And it was quite daunting, I think, at that time for us, despite us being quite active people. It was quite a daunting time. And, you know, people would say, right, okay, so this is what we're going to do. You've got to do something. And you'd be like, yeah, but I don't want to do it. I want somebody else to do it. I don't want to be the first one to do. So we did start pushing back. And we had, for a period of time, you know, we were told it would change over time. Things were starting to change. More women were starting to speak. Things would get better. But they didn't get better. When I go to our headquarters, all the past presidents of our union and general secretaries, there are picture portraits of them lining the corridor. It's all men. You know, there are very few women up there. So we decided we would have to really push hard, and that is what we did. And we did that in two ways. One, by choosing to challenge and getting up. A group of us coordinated, stood up, took motions to conference, pushed back, and started to change rules. One of the rule changes, which we didn't think we'd get through, but we did, was around changing to the speakers at our conference. And we now have a position where at all of our conferences, the first speaker on any motion is a woman, and then they alternate. So it guaranteed that at least 50% of our speakers would be women. We were told that it would be terrible. Women wouldn't do it. Women wouldn't want to get up and speak. But they did. And I have to say, even the critics of that change said after a couple of conferences how much better it was, how inspirational it was to hear from practitioners, because that was the problem. The majority of our members are women, are practitioners, but they weren't getting up and their voices weren't being heard. And the other change we made was around numbers to our executive. So at least 50% of our national executive now have to be women. And again, we were told women wouldn't stand. Women won't stand. They don't, you know, we won't get enough people. What are we going to do if they don't stand? And we have over 50% of women now on our national executive, because of course they did stand and they do want to stand. And I think that position will improve. I just want to end with a couple of things, really. You know, it was hard doing some of those things during that time. And when I stood to be the national president, I wasn't on the executive. There are very few of our national presidents that haven't come from the executive. I was working full time. I was having to, travel up and down the country to talk about what I was doing and sort of fight for that win. But it was really important. And I think the more people that we can get elected to positions who are practitioners in our arena is really important. That are people that know what it's like to be at the forefront of the work that we're doing. And then the final thing I'll say is this. During the pandemic, we saw a huge increase in domestic abuse and violence, and our union, the women in our union really were absolutely appalled by that and did a really good job of organising and building to produce a domestic abuse toolkit, which they got out very quickly during that pandemic. That was a really important thing, but that was done because we have women now who organise and talk about issues that women, that affect women on a daily basis. And there are many, many more examples of that where we have coordinated and built and campaigned for rights for women. And then the very final thing I want to say, I'm sorry, I just want to say something about our job as educators, because we have to coordinate as trade unionists, but I'm an educator as well. And my job is to educate children and young people about being better people when they grow up. And we do that by educating them to challenge the stereotypes that they see around them. Our job is to teach them about what a healthy and good relationship is. Our job is to teach them about valuing each other and respecting each other's differences and similarities. And we have done a lot of work as a union, produced a whole bank of materials about stereotypes, stop you doing stuff, a huge piece of work at the moment on looking at sexism in schools, which is really, really concerning, I have to say. Our job as educators is to challenge that, is to educate our young people and make sure that we are giving them the skills so that we reduce what, you know, people, Tracy talked about, you know, doing things to provide safe spaces for women, you know, safe buses, safe transport, but actually women shouldn't have to think about whether it's safe for them to do something. If we educate our young people, if we educate our society, we will have a society where women are safe to walk the streets at night, where women don't have to think, I've got a phone ahead, I've got to put on a bright coloured coat, I can't walk down that street because there aren't street lights, because our society will respect all people and we won't have the situation that we've had during lockdown where women are attacked, women are murdered. So, you know, I think it's really important that we take that forward as educators. That's my commitment, and I know our union is doing a lot of work around that, and we've got lots of members that are really looking post-pandemic at what a different curriculum could look like, how we can make our schools a better place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Louise, for everything you've shared with us this morning, and thank you to the 4 panellists. Jenny's now going to invite people to ask questions to the panellists. So over to you, Jenny. Thank you.
Hi, sorry. We've only got a couple of questions in the box, and
Okay.
actually, my daughter, so, she's in another room. So, Rob, can you unmute Gigi?
Yeah, Gigi, you can go.
Hello, Gigi, are you there?
She's just read it out, so I don't understand. Rob, did you unmute her? Try again.
Hello. At our school, girls are told that we couldn't show our ankles because it was distracting to the boys. What can be done to challenge this attitude? Thank you.
Would any of the panellists like to pick that up? Tracy?
Your ankles. Did you say ankles?
Yeah, we had to wear long socks and long trousers to cover our ankles.
This is like Victorian England. That's the most extraordinary thing. And I just wanted to come in because a wee while ago, I got a load of abuse for showing a shoulder at the dispatch box. And the abuse was off the scale, hypersexualized abuse, calling me a slag and a slapper, and I looked like I'd just been taken from behind over the wheelie bin. I mean, the most extraordinary abuse. And we were able to spin it by just being dry on Twitter, and then we auctioned the dress, and I got 20,200 for the Girl Guides, who do brilliant work on supporting young girls and having self-confidence. But I would suggest that your showing ankles is extraordinary, and I would push back from that. Start a petition, speak to your school council leads, find a friendly teacher, maybe take it to your council or your member of parliament. But that is absolutely absurd that we're heading backwards, not forwards, when it comes to the freedom to be a woman. And I just would agree with what Louise was saying. There is no way I am curtailing what women should be allowed to do. This is absolutely about stopping men from being violent, men from being fools. I mean, all of the violence, the majority of the violence against women and men is perpetrated by men and boys. So we need to do that work upstream to reset the dial about actually who's complicit in this. And it is not for women or girls to hide their ankles or their shoulders, or to have the keys in their fist, or to have pretend phone calls when they're walking home. Absolutely. But this is something that just goes beyond the pale. And it sounds like you're already on it anyway, but I would step up and get a group with you who agree and just start a campaign, because it's the most absurd thing.
Thank you for that, Tracy. Jenny, any more questions, please?
Can I just nip in there, Catherine, on that one?
Yes, of course you can.
Sorry,
Thank you.
I mean, I absolutely agree with what Tracy has said. I mean, the alarming thing is that we are starting to see more of this. So I think it is something that needs to be looked at. I mean, we are working on sort of challenging sexism toolkit to go out, which will look at some of the things you've said. And I think we have to start talking to girls and young people in our schools about what is happening and letting their voices be heard, because too often, particularly in the surveys we've done, girls say they don't say anything, they don't report things because nothing is done. They are told that it doesn't, well, I mean, we even had the Ofsted chief saying it didn't really matter, that boys were sending naked pictures to girls. It doesn't really matter. Well, it does matter, actually. It absolutely does matter. And I don't just, at the moment, we have to educate. I educate my daughters to protect themselves. I hate having to do it, but we have to do that at the moment because that's the society we live in. But we do have an opportunity. And I think COVID has, despite the horrible, time it's been, I think it has really opened up people's eyes, and educators particularly are thinking we could have a different society, we could have a different education system if we take hold of that. And I don't want us to lose that opportunity now, and working with like-minded people, so like Tracy, working with you to look at the work that schools are doing there is really, really important. But I do think, Gigi, that you will fight back. I know you will. But I agree with Tracy. Get people around you, find a teacher who does not agree with that, and start engaging, start building, because it is absolutely outrageous.
Can I just add, Catherine, very quickly, because there is that road, isn't it, that goes all the way from schools into the workplace, into life in general. And for me, this is all about power and control. It's about saying to women or girls that if you dress in a particular way and then something happens to you, whether that all the way from somebody shouting out in the street to rape, that it's somehow your fault. And that's why I think it is so important and fantastic that it clearly is being challenged in people's minds. And then it's like how we organise ourselves as women and alongside men who get that too, because that's also disrespectful to those young men at school who would not think in that way and don't want to be stereotyped as thinking in that way either. But the power will come from us as girls and women organising together to push back and say this is wrong and we're not going to put up with it anymore.
Thank you so much for that, Frances. And can I just ask the panellists and all the women that are here today, if you'd support Grace's law? Tragically, a few weeks ago, one of my ex-students was killed, was murdered. She had a date with somebody once, and then after that she was harassed, and very sadly he killed her a few weeks ago. And Toby Perkins is now helping and supporting us in Chesterfield with that law. So if you could all look at Grace's law, sorry, and support that, because that just highlights what you panelists have said. And sorry, I feel a bit emotional because it's an absolutely tragic scenario for someone at 22. So are there any more questions, please, Jenny?
Yeah, we've got a question from Lucy. Rob, if you could unmute Lucy, please.
Is there a petition? Yes, there is a petition. If you have a look, if you go onto Facebook and if you look at Grace's Law, there's actually a Facebook page there, and the Derbyshire Times is working with us as well regarding the petition, which is being circulated, and we're doing badges, etc. And Toby's being very supportive, and we're hoping to take this to Parliament in September. And it's just absolutely a tragedy. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Catherine. I just want to say, first of all, whilst it is an absolute shame that we can't be together physically, this has been the most amazing panel this morning, and I'm just, you've all been incredible, and the things you've said. I just feel really proud at the minute. It's really emotional. I wanted to ask in relation to Gigi's question. I know that in schools we're doing a lot on sexism, but where is this coming from? Why in 2021 do we see an upsurge in this level of sexism in society? I remember when, Tracy, you wore that outfit and you've always looked amazing, and you know, it makes me really mad when there's all this nonsense about a shoulder on display, etc., and how brilliant that you turn that around and raise money for an amazing cause. Are we seeing an upsurge? Has it always been there, or is it because we've got the internet and trolling and I don't know, where is it coming from? Because it doesn't, why now would Gigi in 2021 at school be told that they need to cover their ankles and wear longer skirts, etc., despite the fact that we're really clued up about you know, how to speak to people? Why now? Is it getting worse, or are we just identifying it better? So unpick that if you can. I don't know. I don't know if you will. Thank you.
Catherine, do you just on that, really? I mean, I think it's always been there. So my daughter's in the 18 and the eldest one's in her 20s, and when she was at school, they were told, one of them got told off because she'd got a bra that wasn't plain, and she was told she couldn't wear it because it might distract teachers. I mean, she was absolutely furious about it. But so I think it's always, you know, I don't think it's something new. And I mean, I remember at school, as you know, as a student in secondary school, inappropriate things being said and done. I think it's always been there. I think, I mean, we did a survey in 2017, which was quite harrowing. It's just everywhere, and you can access that on our website. And obviously, we have done some more research since, but I think there is more information coming out about it now. I think young people are starting to speak up more. I think over the past few years, we've seen young people get more active in politics, in protest. And I think that awakens them to the idea that, well, actually, it's not okay. And so I think we have more people speaking out. What I am concerned by some of the repressive practices that appear to be happening in some of our secondary schools, which are much more repressive than we have seen previously. So, you know, Gigi's example is an extreme of that. I mean, how your ankles can affect anyone, I really have absolutely no idea at all. But that's quite an extreme of that. But I think we are, you know, we've also seen during lockdown massive increases in domestic violence and abuse. And I think that just indicates the sort of society that we're living in. We also live in an extremely unequal society. That disparity now has widened. And I think those situations definitely don't help. And the final thing I'd say is, certainly from my point of view in schools, the online abuse that happens now that didn't used to happen, you know, those social medias, children talk to me about things I've never even heard of, sites that I don't even know what they are. They talk to me about things they see, things they hear, and all of that obviously impacts on the things that are happening.
Thank you so much for that, Louise. Does anybody else want to come in on that, please?
I wouldn't mind just kind of adding that I suppose from a perspective, because I still see myself as an organiser and a campaigner. That's the kind of trade unionist I am. And I know that whenever we get an advance in rights or awareness, there is always a backlash. And so one of the things that, you know, from a trade union organising point of view, always prepare for the backlash. So, for example, you know, really simple stuff like gender pay gap reporting. Why was that put on hold for the pandemic? Of all the things, of all the things that could have, you know, were going to be a burden on business, for goodness sake, that was picked out as something that had to be frozen in time. And when we pushed for race pay gap reporting, oh, that would, you know, clearly that would be the straw that would break the camel's back. We can't possibly do that. And the way I see it is that we have seen these amazing movements of women in the form of Me Too, amazing movements for race equality, not least Black Lives Matters. And that as soon as you get that upsurge, you can expect that those who have power and don't want to share it will fight like hell to resist and to put us back down. So I suppose, you know, my view is always that we have to prepare for that kind of reaction. And we do that by building popular support, broad alliances, being ready and sharp. And at a personal level, just like Tracy, you know, she was so sharp and so funny. I mean, you deflated those bloody egos with a hat pin approach, precision targeting. It was just brilliant. And I would say too, Tracy, I've just got to say what you said about being, why is it that women in trade unions and women in public life get that hyper criticism? And I was really relieved to see that backed up by proper research and evidence. It is true. It's not just us feeling paranoid. It doesn't matter what we do. There seems to be this onslaught, particularly those social media pile-ons, that if you are feeling, you know, we all have days when you might be feeling a bit vulnerable or a bit down, and it's designed to intimidate. It is designed to humiliate publicly and put you back in your box. And I think we have to start talking about this, because if I'm truthful, this isn't just, you know, we saw the far right in Batley and Spen, but there were others as well who were actively seeking to stir up humiliation, public humiliation of that woman candidate. And, you know, so let's be honest about this. It's not confined to one part of the political spectrum. And maybe the more we talk about that as women, the stronger we will be in anticipating it and resisting it.
Thank you, Frances. I understand we've got 2 more questions, and I wanted to bring Rehana in as well. And we've literally got about 5 minutes. So, Jenny, can you introduce the 2 people who wanted to ask questions, please?
So we've got Esther and who wants to ask about technology supporting women. Esther, can she be unmuted, please?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I was really impressed by the first statement of talking about the now rather than the past. And I want to ask the panel about using technology. Because let's face it, most of the union people that fight for our rights are volunteers in the workplace. They're not getting extra pay or even sometimes not even getting any extra release to do the job and the valuable job we do. And when we talk about the Labour Party, for example, or any sort of political party that you want to represent, it's the grassroots members that do all the campaigning, work the streets and all that. And if you want to progress on that, most of those meetings are 8 o'clock in the afternoon, or evening, and all that sort of stuff. So a lot of the meetings now are on Zoom, you know, so we could use Zoom to use that. So how can we use how can we use technology to boost the women throughout the movement? And that's my question really, and look to the future and use it positively.
Thank you so much. Rehana, did you want to come in there, please?
It's a very big question for a couple of minutes, but what I will say is there's been a complete revolution in the pandemic, because we were closed off from workplaces, and rightly said, as the person, sorry, I did catch the name. Apologies, I'm rubbish with names. Esther, as Esther said, what the unions wouldn't have survived in this pandemic if it wasn't for our frontline shop stewards and organisers. And I think accessibility and that digital organising matters. Unions have often been too slow in embracing and recognising that the digital world has a place here to stay even post-pandemic. And you know, as a traditional union organiser, everybody says, well, you can only recruit face-to-face. Nobody disagrees with that, but digital footprint enhances our ability to connect. This morning, you know, look how many people on the call this morning. You can bring thousands and thousands of people together on digital platforms, and I think what we need to do is, as a movement, recognise that we need to make sure our members have that accessibility. They understand how to use the digital technology, but we need to embrace it, because as a mum myself, you know, nobody wants to be in a social club at 7 o'clock at night. You know, you want to be what works for you. And I think so the way we've got to do it is our future leaders are women, by the way, and there are digital savvy women I've met throughout the pandemic, and I think we've just got to harness that much more. And I just wanted to quickly pick up on the other issue about sexism. Why is there an increase? You know, it's the point that I made earlier, is we've got centuries of patriarchal systems that we've got to unpick and break, and that takes time. And what's been great about the Black Lives Matter movement, the Me Too movement, is we've all got voices that we can organise ourselves around. And I think what unions do best, more than anything, is organising ourselves and creating those platforms. And I just think we've got to do much more of that. And we need more women in technology, because let's face it, we don't want the tech world all being dominated by men. So it starts back to what Lucy's is in school, is educating and encouraging young girls to take a career in technology, because then they're more likely to produce the products that matter to us as well. And that's why we need the role models as well going forward. So big question, quick response. I'm conscious it's 11:30 now.
Thank you so much. Do any more of our panelists want to address that question really quickly? Anything you'd like to say?
Only to say that, like, we've been running, and please do check the TUC website, we've been running webinars and events online throughout this. It was so noticeable. We did one on sexual harassment and health and safety issues right at the start, and it was so noticeable that loads of reps were saying in the chat box, the only reason I'm here is because I've given the kids their tea and I can join, or I put the kids to bed and I can join. So, you know, they would never have gone to the workplace. Now, I think we need both, because for people like me, I'm desperate to get out and about more and be back with people. You know, there's no substitute for me. But what a massive opportunity when we have unions like NEU getting 500,000 people on a single Zoom call. You know, what a massive opportunity to organise we've got, and to bring new layers of activism into the movement, young mums and dads in particular, I've noticed. So I think it's, you know, we've got a real chance here if we invest and go big.
Thank you. Okay, can I thank the panelists this morning? Frances, Tracy, Rehana and Louise, absolutely inspirational speakers and inspirational women. Can I thank all the delegates for zooming in this morning? And I apologise if all of you have not been able to ask you questions, but there is a session this afternoon. So thank you so much for joining us. We will now hear the words of Mary Macarthur as Sheila Chamber Highlands reenacts the call to arms speech from 1910. Thank you.
I recognise that many of you here today will be wondering what right I have, a stranger, to be speaking to you on behalf of the Women Chainmakers of Cradley Heath. I hope you will come to believe me when I say it is the sense of injustice and unfairness that drives me to use all the resources at my disposal to help improve the circumstances of these women and their families. For making 1 yard of chain, we get 1 penny. That is what the Women Chainmakers tell us. 1 penny for a yard of chain, struck to last a lifetime. And these women work in conditions that would not be out of place in the Middle Ages. Well, these conditions are out of place in 1910. We need to remind ourselves that we are now living in the 20th century, one in which we have the opportunity to help each other move forward to a fairer, more civilised way of life. Not for the few, but for all. It's not the God-given prerogative of those born to wealth and privilege, of whose number I count myself one, to live comfortably off the backs of others such as yourselves. And I feel it is only right and fair that I use my accident of privilege to assist and support these Cradley women in their struggle for better rates of pay. You know, my first glimpse of Cradley Heath was on a dark November afternoon. As my train drew into Cradley Heath station, I looked down along the rows of long, low sheds. The red glows of the forge fires and the dim shadows of the toiling workers put me in mind of some Middle Ages torture chamber, the likes of which you will only see in Madame Tussauds in London. Women of all ages were at work in those forges, their children around their feet, and they had been since 7 o'clock that morning, a mere 12-hour day. To those of you who know little or nothing of the chain-making trade and the women that work in it, let me tell you more. The oldest worker I have spoken with is 79 years of age. Yes, 79 years of age. And she has worked at the forge since she was a child of 10. Now her children and her children's children are all slaves of the forge. Remember, 1 penny for a yard of chain from 7 in the morning until 7 each evening. And then, at the end of a long, long working week, our chainmaker can expect to earn between 5 and 8 shillings, on which she must feed, clothe and house her family. Those women and their children earn barely enough to keep starvation at bay. Indeed, it is said that none of the chainmakers' houses need larders, for they all live hand to mouth. And so the hopeless, despairing struggle for existence goes on, unless we gather together our strength and courage and go forward as one. Things do not have to remain so just because they've been so. There are good men amongst the employers and manufacturers, and there are misguided men. Those who are truly gentlemen will see our struggle for a fair rate of pay as a just and realistic one. Divided we can do nothing, but together we are mighty and as strong as the chain you make. Withdraw your labour, lay down your tools, let the fires in your forges grow cold. And this way you will see for yourselves how valued is your trade. Oh yes, the employers have stockpiled cheap chain at your expense, but it will not be long before they're wondering who's going to make the next lot. Already 800 of you Cradley women have downed tools, and in doing so you have risen up against injustice for the future of your industry and your children. Those women are preparing to march the streets as we speak. They will march for freedom and the right to earn 2.5 halfpenny an hour. Many of you women know full well that you've already been duped by underhand means. The right to a minimum wage has already been agreed by the manufacturers. This call for action is to support all those women who've had little or no schooling and have fixed their marks on the so-called petitions of your employers. In effect, you've given away your right to the minimum wage. So join with us. Join the National Federation of Women Workers. March with us for freedom and the rights. And I give you my word, not one of you will go hungry. For freedom and the right.
Thank you so much. The next panel will commence at 12 o'clock. During the break, we will play the 1976 BBC programme, Nothing to Lose, made by Sarah Boston. Thank you and see you at 12 o'clock.
They were stalking them. about the wages and that. There was a bit of something going on. We didn't take a lot of notice at the time. And it come as we was at work one day and we'd been talking about it, and in walked Mary Macarthur, and she came straddling in the shop, and the boss was in. He was more times out than in, and he was a great big man, massive, and she says, out, out. We all looked at her. Of course, we felt a bit frightened. I think I was about 16 then. And he says, we looked at him. Instead of looking at her, we looked at him as much as to say he's the boss. He says, you might as well get out, he says. It means it. And out we came.
Rouse you women, rouse around you. Towns and cities cry, Godspeed you. Rouse, shake off the fears that bound you. Women, rouse, be true. At length the light is breaking. The sweat and stone is shaking. Oh, do your part with all your heart.
My first glimpse of Cradley Heath was on a dark November afternoon. The train stopped just outside the station, as it had a perverse habit of doing, and from the window of the carriage I looked down on a long, low shed. The iron grating which served as windows, the red glow of the forge fires, and the dim shadows of the toiling workers made me think of some torture chamber of the Middle Ages. Later, when I knew more of the life and labour of the district, that first fleeting impression returned and has never quite left me since.
Well, everybody else seemed to be making it. I thought I'd like a go. There was nothing else, really. If you went to service, you was a prisoner. You'd never let you out much.
Well, I was about 12 when I started to make chain first. I had to stand on 4 bricks. I was tall enough to reach the block, you know.
When I first made chain, well, learned to make it, I was 11.
There was nothing else. No babies to marry. I couldn't go out nursing babies because I couldn't pay you. You got to make chain.
My mother learned us. She used to have the people in to work for her. She got the work up. She got the work up and worked for Sykes's and Willits up. Big factories, you know.
I used to get the bends off the iron and straighten them and cut it and shut links.
1905, that's when I started to work in the make chain. 1905. And I had £0.50 a week. From Monday morning, 7 o'clock, till 7 o'clock at night, till 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. £0.50 a week. That's we had to go errands and couple the chains and put them together and learn to make it in between. We weren't long many weeks learning though.
Oh, well, I had nothing when I was 11. We'd got to learn when we used to spoil a lot of iron, burn it or, you know, not get it just right. But when we got it all right, we had to make chain, but we'd got to learn to make it. We had to learn to make it. And when I got married, I used to make 300 weight a week, a bare sevens, £0.50 100 weight.
The Woodhouse's brothers, they used to employ the women to make chain in the chain factory. But most of the chain was made by hat workers. And they used to go and fetch a bundle of iron, and the women used to carry it on their shoulders and bring it home. And they used to climb the Cradley Hill, and it was a big hill. And there was one woman on her, what was her name? I just forget. Well, anyhow, she wasn't a very big one, but raw bone. And she used to get a bundle iron on her back and carry it up cradle like a man. And then when she'd made her iron, they used to have a dobbin, a square dobbin with 2 wheels on. And that's how they used to take the chain away, as they called it. And take it, and then when they got there, they sometimes got twisted. I fetched my own many a time. I remember a man stopping me one day with his cart. He says, "What brings you doing that?" I didn't know him. I says, "Well, I've got to get my living, haven't I, honest?" He says, "Well, it isn't a job for you to do. You haven't how to do that. You just got off the tools and the pair of blow bellows. Didn't have the blast thing, not to the women. And we used to get the steel up in the fire. And then we got the tools to shape it. We used to have to shoot it, and then there was a piece of steel with a point on. We used to shoot it on that. They called them big ones."
We'd put the iron in the fire. We'd pull this one out, put it on there, and cut about that much off. See, and got the tongues, and held it, and doubled it over like that, and held it like that. And then we knocked that and that together. Then we'd got to put it in the fire again. And then when it was hot, you got to mind it didn't burn off, you got to have it just right, and then you'd bring it onto the anvil, and then we used to knock it together, weld it. We used to weld it.
I used to make what they call country work. That was all the chains that the farmers used on the ploughs and different things in the fields. And when there was horses, of course, they got to have all tackle on them. They used to make with the short chains and the long ones, They used to reach from the harness to the carts in O'Con. That's how that is, summer. There you go, she was a typical chainmaker, woman chainmaker. Well, she got the statue of a man, really, what we call it was a monument. And I could knock out, what's the work, I'd be there cutting and joining up the link and then turning it over, putting it into the fire, and then had it come with the summer, boom, back, boom. And about 4 or 5, and they knew from practice, every blow was true. And when that link was made, it was as pretty as a picture. Down it would go, same over and over again, piece of iron would come out, in what they call the yard, cut it off and then bend it over on the stiddy, as they called it. That's the old name for anvil. A little stiddy. And they used to bend it round in a U shape, pick it up with the tongues, join up and on the bickern again, round and round, and into the fire. Now that was 12 hours a day like that, same thing over and over again. And sweat used to come off the roses. It was heavy work, but I really was pretty good at it, although I could have done without it. It used to, of course, make your hands hard, I was always ashamed of my hands. Well, old and tongs and hammers, it disfigured your hands. You used to get burnt sometimes, the fleshes, when you was working, and you took no notice. Mind you, to put some blister on you every time. It caused you to have hands that was not nice.
Isn't my umber on? Look, you see that knuckle? Look at it. My umber on that. The children saying, "What's that, Gran? Look at your hand, it is funny." I says, "My umber on." I don't know what I mean in that.
Women went blind when they were young, and the faces, most of them, emaciated, thin, haggard looking. I've got a Cradley Parish magazine compiled in the year before the strike, and looking through the burial pages, every month there's a big list of chainmakers' children that were only a few weeks old. Month after month it was the same. So the infantile mortality must have been very great in them days. You take a woman, she'd have a child, then 4 days after, in the basket it'd go with a piece of flannel around it, and she was making chain with the baby by the side under the anvil. So what can you expect?
I used to go down to my mother's to work, and I used to take one. 12 months after, I used to take another. I had 2 in 12 months and 5 days. And I used to put them on a block where I worked, on a wooden thing they both got to sit in. when they was awake, but when they wasn't awake, Mother used to have them in the house.
They had a swing fastened in the shop from the beam, you know. Well, in most shops, it got the boiler where they had to boil the clothes, and there was a sink here and a tap, and they had to come out of the house across a yard about like and wash them in there. There was no bathrooms.
I used to get up in the morning and go in the shop, work about 2 rods, come out, get them ready for school, give them the breakfast, send them to school, and go back again. Then I should come back and put the potatoes on, as I said before. When I come back, they prepped ball dry or all the weighted ball head on them or something, and got time to go and see if they're not cooking proper, like. Not them days.
What does this mean? Take one chain, chosen at random, number 6 coil. The manufacturers themselves estimate that to earn 10 shillings a week on this chain, a worker must weld over 5,000 links. Each link requires at least 10 blows from the hammer. A week's work means, then, more than 50,000 blows. And then the bellows must be blown, the forge attended to, the iron rods lifted. The iron must be carried from warehouse to workshop, and the finished chain carried back again. And for this the women ask 10 shillings. To many of them that spells riches.
The Royal Commission got to work in 1889. That was the springboard from 1889. That was the springboard. But look how many years it took the Royal Commission and the Board of Trade to be fixed up, to fix the price. 1910 from 1889.
Little wonder that the chain-making trade was chosen as the first trade to have minimum wages fixed by law. For 7 months, employers and workers' representatives have sat with Board of Trade appointed members to fix a minimum wage. On May 17th, notice was given of the rates proposed to be fixed for the hammered section of the chain trade. During 3 months, objections were heard, and on August 17th, final notice was given. From that date, the women were legally entitled to the new rates, an increase from 50% to 150% unless they signed an agreement to the contrary. This the Act allows for a further 6 months. Many of the women can neither write nor read, and quite a number of them innocently fixed their marks to the petition, as they called it, submitted by their employers. Great was their indignation when they discovered once again that the long-hoped-for benefits were to be postponed. Ever since the trade was scheduled, the women have been working at high pressure. Huge stocks have been accumulated against the anticipated increase of wages, and another 6 months' work at the old rate would mean little or no work at all when the new rates come finally and fully into force.
The chain masters come along with their fine agreement. They asked we all to sign with names for taking lower payment. Then the union come along, said, "Don't you want your price?" So we said we done. They didn't have to ask the question twice. So
the Trade Board had fixed the price. Well, there's a buffer period allowed for the gaffers to complete their contracts, and then at a certain date this operated the new price. But during that buffer period, they got the women, foolish women, to sign for the old price. That was, I think, about a penny farther an hour, just way that, 12 hours a day, just over a shilling a day.
They were about to have a strike, and I think they were sent up to London to collect on the streets. There was 12 of them. I've tried to get in touch with if there was one left, and there was one just passed away that went down Woodfield Avenue, just passed away. Well, I didn't go. My dad wouldn't let me go. They got scarves round here, you know, and what was on was they'd come out collecting for the poor chain makers of Cradley Heath and Old Hill. That was what it was. Well, when the police saw them, and that. They thought they were suffragettes, and they jailed them. And they were in jail all night, and they got in touch with the head workers, and when they knew, they were treated like ladies. They had a lovely breakfast, and they did wonders with the collection.
Last night I went, a neighbour called me in. One of my old boyfriends had come from Canada, and he's 78. He was 12 years old, but he can remember it. And I asked him about it. He says, I says, can you all remember the 1910 women's strike, chain strike? He says, can I be in the, what was he said? He says, there was one damn good woman, he says, I don't know her name, he said, but she said, if the women will lay down their hammers, I'll pay them till the strike's over. I said, who was that? He said, I don't know. I said, well, I'll tell you, it was Mary Macarthur.
Strike, 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 a blow for freedom every time. Cast your chains away from you upon the ground. Strike, 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 a blow for freedom every time as you go marching round. Now come along and join the union. Don't let us have to ask you twice. Now come along and join the union, all fighting for our prize.
We came out. Then the next morning we had Mary Macarthur called a meeting in Cradle Heath Theatre. And then we had Sir Edward Cadbury, Dani. He gave a good donation to the start for the strike, because we got nothing coming. There was nothing for us to pick up. We'd paid no union ever, and we didn't pay insurance even then.
I said it was too late to do anything. It was Friday. We'll have to wait till Monday. Now, can you see? Well, then on the Saturday, when we take the money in, we see those over the union. And, of course, I told them my message and that, and they told me their message. And he says, well, the best thing to do is to call them out on strike. But there was a lot of them out on strike. How they got to know, I can't tell you. But all those that paid me union, I went to all the homes, and they were nearly all out on strike.
Miss Macarthur gave us a box apiece. We had to go and stand by the station, me and another. She posted us somewhere else, different works. And there was quite a few collectors. And then, of course, after that, we had another meeting down in the Institute, what they'd built. We had Miss Varley down, she came from London, and Miss Stocks, she gave us 4 shillings a week. What had been collected and the money that had come in, she paid us 4 shillings strike pay. And then we was out for about a month. The men didn't take much notice. They know the women would get on a rattle.
Dear Sir, we earnestly appeal to trade unionists throughout the country on behalf of the women chainmakers of Cradle Heath, now locked out for refusing to sign an agreement to work for 6 months at lower rates than the minimum, 2.5 halfpenny an hour, fixed by the Trade Board. In another 6 months, contracting out will be illegal, but in the meantime, huge stocks can be accumulated in anticipation of the compulsory rate. Despite the low earnings of these women, 4 shillings to 5 shillings weekly, a number of them are members of the National Federation of Women Workers and will be entitled to strike benefit. It is, however, absolutely necessary that some measure of support should be extended to those who up to now are not members of any organisation. Some 200 of these women have up to now stood by their fellow workers in resisting the agreement, but their condition is pitiable in the extreme. A fund has been opened, to which we trust your society will contribute as generously as it can afford. We are, yours faithfully, on behalf of the Women's Trade Union League, Gertrude Tuckwell, DJ Shackleton, Mary Macarthur.
I'll tell you where they used to hold a lot of the meetings, where the Workers' Institute is now. And it was on what we call Lowertown Bunk. Lowertown Bunk, well, it was a pit bank at that time, but it's been removed now, all the spoil from it. But anyhow, that's where they used to hold the meetings, and she could hold them, I tell you, and everybody was behind the chainmakers.
Yes, we used to walk, have meetings down on the fields and round about. She walked us about a lot, but we got through all right.
Well, yes, I can remember women walking about with chains hanging around the necks and placards on the chest. Some of them got placards, ignorance, disgrace, help in the fight for tuppence halfpenny an hour. And half on them and wearing the husband's caps with hat pins stuck through it and it's all over that was the workaday attire at that one time.
They marched all round behind the band and they sang the song, Miss MacArthur and the Union. We will stand by the side, and they got flags waving. Yes, that's true. And I'm not sure, but I think the Salvation Army joined them once.
All the school children and the chainmakers' children, they joined up in gangs. They used to, at night time, when they come from school, they sing this. The the women chainmakers are on a big strike. The gaffers think they can do what they like. They work very hard by night and by day, and for it they get a rotten pay. Ollie-o, the gaffers and that day or die.
Mary Macarthur learned me one, but I've really forgot it, but I know it is something we'll fight a right good fight, because we're fighting for our rights, for our pay. And how it ended up with that. That's all I remember of that.
Miss MacArthur and the Union, we will stand by your side. And then la 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 till the devil's all wake at night.
Thank you and good afternoon and welcome back to the second panel, which is Women Striking for Success. Our panellists this afternoon are Dani Harvey, Sarah Evans, Venda Premkumar, Vanessa Roberts, and we warmly welcome them. All of these women have led successful campaigns or action recently, and we will share their experiences and perspectives about campaigns and industrial action from the front. Again, if you have any questions for our panellists, please put them in the Q&A box. We will try and invite as many of you as possible to ask your questions. So a very warm welcome to our first speaker, who is Dani Harvey. Thank you, Dani, for joining us.
Thank you. So my name is Dani and I'm the PCS Midlands Regional Secretary. And can I start by saying that I am so privileged and honoured to be sharing this platform with all these incredible women. Your achievements not only inspire me, but so many others to work harder for women and to make a dent wherever we can. So I'm very proud to be standing alongside you. I'm just going to briefly talk about women in the workplace and women in leadership. My colleague Sarah will be talking about the DVLA strike, so I'll leave that in her capable hands. As I said, I'm the PCS Midlands Regional Secretary, but before working for PCS, I worked for the DWP for 15 years. And my involvement with the trade union movement was both hindered and helped by middle-aged white men. And although I was actively discouraged to get more involved by a middle-aged white man. I was also pushed into it by the right sort of middle-aged white men. The men that helped and encouraged me had a succession plan. They knew that we needed more women and they trusted in me to help achieve that. However, I still work with men who attempt to talk over me, talk down to me, mansplain to me. That's one of my favourites. In fact, the other day I had a male argue with my advice, dismiss my advice, but yet when another male suggested the exact same thing as me, he accepted it, no questions asked. So why is this still happening in 2021? So in my role as regional secretary, I'm passionate about getting more women involved. We simply do not have enough. Women are still lagging behind in top positions in trade unions, despite years of empowering policies. Now, there's a widespread concept that leadership is personified by being the General Secretary or the CEO. On the contrary, we should get used to a decentralized concept of leadership. In PCS, we have thousands of leaders. Every rep, every advocate in the workplace is a leader of their co-workers. Leadership is at every level. In PCS, we've just set up a Midlands Women's Network that will hopefully enable us to identify, coach, mentor, and empower other women in the workplace. Now, let me just say that being a working woman and a working mother is hard. I feel so guilty sometimes. And I know that all women, whether at home or in the workplace, feel that sometimes. So I'm not saying that staying in the workplace is right for everyone, but for those that do want to stay in the workplace, what are the messages that we're sending them? So the thing I see time and time again is women being more doubtful of themselves, less confident. Not too long ago, there was a promotional exercise and I heard my female colleagues talking about how they think they messed it up. They didn't include this, they should have done that. And the male colleagues stating that they thought they had done good, that they were more than confident that they had it in the bag. Now, the problem with this is that it shows what the data shows, that women systematically underestimate their own abilities. More often than not, men attribute their success to themselves and women attribute it to other external factors. And so some say, why does this matter? And it matters a lot because no one gets opportunities by sitting in the corner and not at the table, by not recognizing their own abilities. Now, unfortunately, me telling all these women that they should believe in themselves and they should own their own success is not going to change the world. We have to get women at the table. Now, I believe we've made more progress in the workforce than we have in the home. The data clearly shows this. If a woman and a man work full-time and have a child, more often than not, the woman does twice as much housework than the man does. And the woman does 3 times the amount of childcare than the man does. So she's got 2 or 3 jobs and he's got the 1. Now, who do you think drops out of the workforce when someone needs to be home more? Now, the causes of this are really complicated and it involves lots of different factors that we don't have time to go into today. And I know men that stay at home and I know men that do the majority of childcare. But we need to recognise that all these jobs are equally important and should be shared evenly if we're going to even things out and allow women the same opportunities. And I'll also say that working women today are lucky. We don't live in the same world that our grandmothers and great-grandmothers did, where choices for women were so limited. But we still have a problem. Women are still not given the same opportunities as men. We also know that women are pitted against each other. I see time and time again, women being labelled as the harder worker because they work full-time, as opposed to their colleague who has to work part-time. Now, a couple of things we can do as women is talk to our mentors, supporters and friends and make a plan. So how are you going to break down the barriers of being stereotyped as being seen as a bit of a bitch or having your family choices questioned? And there are structural barriers too. Don't wait until you need help balancing work and family life or to be fairly evaluated. Be a supporter of systems and changes that aid gender equality, even if you don't personally need them immediately. Don't take a backward step. Don't shy away from taking up space in the world. And don't assume you're too junior or that people are too busy. We need to reach out and network. And trade unions need to lead by example. We need women leading the way. We need women empowering other women. Every woman who steps forward is making a small space for the women that come next. So now is the moment. I invite all women to join their union, to change our organisations for the future, because we are women, we are powerful, and we will change the world. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Dani. I'd now like to invite our next panellist to speak, Sarah Evans, and welcome, Sarah, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine, and what an opening speech by Dani. If I haven't felt proud before this point for leading the DVLA, then I certainly do now. And it's a great honour to be asked to speak at this event today, but I'm here on behalf of all my members at the DVLA. So back towards the beginning of the year, never did I think that I would still be speaking about our dispute in the present terms, because I thought after a week or two of strike action, we would have reached an agreement and things would be back to some kind of normal. So the fact that we are still in the middle of our dispute is both disappointing and inspiring, which you may think is a really strange word to use. So let me explain a little bit why I feel that is appropriate. So it's disappointing that our employer has no regard for our safety and the concerns we have, but it is incredibly inspiring to see just what this dispute has done, not for us as a branch or even PCS, but for the entire union movement. I've never in my life seen such a show of support. Our members at the DVLA have come together as one and remain as strong today as they were on the very first day that we took part in industrial action. To get to that point, we had to ballot all our members, but we were balloting over a situation that was only affecting around 2/3 of them. So we have members who are non-operational in their role and work from home and are going to remain there for the foreseeable. And we've had to rely on these members to stand up and support the colleagues who are being forced to go into an unsafe building every day and even sit less than 2 meters apart. And stand up in support of them they did. They showed that together is definitely a stronger position to be in. And we won our ballot in the strangest of times when we weren't able to have any face-to-face contact with our members. We couldn't speak to them as they were entering and leaving the workplace like we normally would. And we had to rely solely on virtual communication. So, as I said, inspiring. And that continues. We are still calling members out on strike. And despite all the horrendous scare tactics that the DVLA are using, our members still have trust in us and they come out on strike in force. Members who have had to work on site, but also those members who are working from home, truly showing that as a branch, we are united. And over the last few months, we've seen an incredible growth in our membership. We've become the largest branch within PCS and had a week where we saw over 100 new members join. We have more reps than we've ever had before. We've got an incredible group of activists who truly have gone over and above during the dispute and continue to do so with the same fire as they have shown from the very beginning. And whilst things will that continue for a long time, do tend to fall further back in the minds of people, this definitely isn't the case with our dispute at all. If anything, the support continues to grow. We see strike action that gets stronger by the day, messages of support that still flooding in, and our fighting fund is receiving donations, not just from other branches and other unions, but from individual members too. They are that touched by what is going on within the DVLA. And it's clear to see now that our dispute isn't something that is between our branch and the DVLA. It's a dispute of an entire union movement against a horrendous Tory government. And it's a dispute that must continue until we win, because I have no doubt at all that we can and we will win this dispute. Predominantly, the DVLA has a very female-heavy workforce, and there's no denying that as women, we have to consider things slightly different to our male counterparts. We will primarily be the caregivers, not just of our children, but of our family members too. And I've heard heartbreaking stories from members who, due to being forced into the offices, have had to make incredibly hard decisions. Some of them have not seen their vulnerable or elderly relatives because they are so scared that they will take COVID home to them. We've had members of staff forced to take unpaid leave to ensure that they can care for their family and keep them safe. And it's for each and every woman who has sat at her desk and cried because of the decisions this government are forcing them to make that we still push on with this dispute. The decisions made by the DVLA are just having the biggest impact on the lower grades within the agency. The AAs and the AOs, and these are the largest group of part-time workers too. And our dispute is bringing to the forefront the greater degree of discrimination faced by women and people who require more flexible arrangements. Now, what's even more disappointing is the reluctance of the DVLA management to recognise this clear disadvantage that the part-time staff have. I've dealt with a personal case recently of a woman who was having her pay stopped because she contracted COVID at work and is now suffering the effects of long COVID, which is more prevalent amongst women. And I've also seen management grant and then rescind paid special leave to a woman who needs to be present at home to care for her sick daughter. And to put that into context, her daughter has tried to commit suicide recently, and the management feel that she needs to be in work to do her job instead of continuing to do it at home where she can keep her daughter safe. And it's unbelievable that she's been forced to come into work on site or face disciplinary proceedings. The women in the branch are suffering the double whammy of the impact of COVID, and the family and increased caring responsibilities, and an employer who takes little regard for their well-being and offers them no flexibility to deal with the unprecedented challenges that are arriving. But then there's also the other side of the story. We've got a senior leadership in the DVLA, which is female, but the PCS team that have led this dispute are a team of female reps and employees. There's myself, my branch secretary, Sophia, and my full-time officer, Becky, and we've led this dispute from the ground. And to say that we are proud of the way that the branch is handling this campaign would be a complete understatement. And hearing from so many inspiring female speakers in the first session this morning, and really looking forward to the ones that are coming up as well, it just goes to show that women can, will, and continue to do great things. And we will continue to fight this campaign with the DVLA and continue to make the workplace a better, safer and fairer place for everyone, regardless of how long that is going to take us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you for sharing what's happening within your union and all the work you're doing. Thank you. It's my greatest pleasure now to introduce our next panelist, Venda Premkumar. Thank you, Venda.
Thank you very much. As Sarah was speaking, my blood was boiling. I was so angry to hear what she was saying. But sadly, I do know, that's been my experience as a branch secretary, working in the education sector as well. So total solidarity with you, Sarah. I just want to thank everyone for having me here today. I'm an English teacher. I'm also the district secretary for the Redbridge branch of the National Education Union. In my role, I work closely with about 100 union reps to support and represent over 3,000 members that we have in Redbridge. The government's reckless and very cavalier attitude at the start of the pandemic meant that schools became battlegrounds between education unions and the government, and Redbridge NEU has been at the forefront of this fight, in my opinion. In Redbridge, we had very high levels of infection rates, the second highest COVID rates in the country at the height of the pandemic. We also have a very high proportion of Black and minority ethnic population living in multi-generational households. So it's no exaggeration to say educators in Redbridge and across the country did feel like we were lambs being sent to slaughter. So our district meetings grew from 40 members attending to over 300 members attending, because members felt members were turning to their unions to literally save their lives. Quickly, feelings of powerlessness changed when we recognized the collective power we have as workers. So as a district, we recognize the importance of recruiting reps in schools to organize the workers. And I'm really pleased to say we recruited over 70 new reps in the pandemic. We went from having about 25 or so reps to over 100 reps. With this new level of organisation, reps felt empowered to challenge the health and safety concerns in schools. We had no choice about whether to be in or not, but at least we could fight to ensure schools were safe, not just for the workers, but for our children and our community too. From feeling like lambs to slaughter, workers united as a district and discovered their agency, and school management began to actually talk to union reps about how to create safer working environments. Our district WhatsApp with over 100 reps was buzzing with messages as they shared their stories and compared management approaches. This type of knowledge and unity became power for us. Our reps began to make an indent in the school's top-down management approaches, but none of this happened without struggle though. 2 secondary schools in Redbridge, unfortunately, had no intention of listening to union members or reps, and we had no other choice but to take strike action in those schools. These school managements had always ruled by fear and bullying, and they were not about to let the pandemic change that. One of the schools, which is an academy, had a very punitive sickness policy. They put sick teachers and support staff on capability processes and gave them warnings for being sick. So I represented a pregnant woman who had anxiety about the lack of safety, another woman who had PTSD, having suffered prolonged domestic abuse, and another woman who got chronic back pain and was bedridden. The school was intent to put all these women on capability and wanted to dismiss them. Whilst representing them, I also discovered the school had slashed sick pay significantly as well. It felt very Victorian to me, so I informed the members, and all these cases of cruel treatment coupled with a lack of concern for their health and safety made the workers very, very angry. And it was no surprise when I recommended strike action to the union members, I got a resounding yes back. And I'm really pleased to say that after 6 days of strike action with chants of don't sack the sick, a real embarrassment to the school, the belligerent and hostile management caved in. They conceded to scrap the punitive sickness policy, sick pay was restored, and they have agreed to have regular meetings with the school-based union reps. And it's fair to say the school management thought they can treat workers with contempt, and we've shown them it's far better to engage, listen, and be open to dialogue. In another secondary school, strike action is still ongoing. During the height of the pandemic, back in January, when Boris Johnson announced a second lockdown, saying schools were vectors of transmission, the head teacher at this school insisted that all staff come into school to deliver online lessons. The head was going against government guidelines because she didn't trust staff to work from home. And this is why she wanted them to come in. Even when pregnant staff requested to work from home, the head refused. Those with medical conditions, those having to travel on public transports, and staff members who had vulnerable family members at home were all refused. So we helped the union group organise, and about 25 union members invoke Section 44 of the Health and Safety Act and force the school to back down. The head had no choice but to allow staff to work from home. However, the story doesn't end there. The head one of the staff who took part in Section 44 action have been relentlessly targeted and victimised. One of the union reps has been sacked on grossly overstated charges. Another 4 members will be losing their jobs unexpectedly. So the school's response to staff daring to raise safety concerns is reprisal and picking them off one by one. Unsurprisingly, when I recommended strike action, the staff felt they had no choice. And even though they're terrified of further reprisals, they're on strike now. We've already had 6 days of strike action, and the chant on the picket line is, "What's disgusting? Union busting." The dispute remains unresolved, and union members have voted to continue strike action into the next academic year in September. It's an important fight to win, not only because the strikers are still being intimidated and anyone finding the courage to join the strikers is being pulled into management meetings and warned they will be blacklisted. We're determined to show that victimising reps and members for union activity can't go unchallenged. So to sum up, the pandemic and the last year has been really eventful for us in Redbridge NEU, as it has been for all trade unionists committed to organising workers. But we have recognised our power as a collective and found the strength to take on some very big battles. And we've also found friendship and allies in the community as well, thanks to these battles. And that's important too. But it only feels like the beginning. The pandemic has shown that we're prepared to defend ourselves when our lives are literally put at risk. And it has opened our eyes to so much that is wrong in the workplace and the education sector as a whole. We know we face the same battles that all trade unionists face in the private sector: lack of funding, threat of privatisation, and erosion of workers' rights. Our fight is your fight, and your fight is our fight. So let us remember that the workers united will never be defeated. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Venda, and thank you for all the inspirational work that you're doing during a difficult time. Thank you. I'd like to welcome our next speaker, Vanessa Roberts. Welcome, Vanessa, and thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. Really inspirational women on this panel. A little bit of an introduction to myself. I work for British Gas, and as you may have heard, we have had a pretty big strike over this past year. So we had a strike that started in January, and it was probably the biggest gas strike in living history. It was absolutely huge all across the country. So the reason we went on strike is the company wanted to do something which is called fire and rehire, or dismiss and re-engage. So basically ripping up our contracts and saying, if you do not sign this new one on worse terms and conditions by a particular date, you no longer have a job, which is illegal actually in quite a few countries, but in this country it's allowed. And yeah, it's absolutely abhorrent that it is, but that's our government at the moment, and they've allowed it to happen. It has been raised in Parliament. We've had Boris Johnson say, you know, it shouldn't be happening, but he's not actually put his money where his mouth is and done anything about it. And there are many other companies now doing exactly the same thing. So because our strike took place obviously during lockdown and during COVID, a lot of our things had to be done virtually. So we had virtual rallies, virtual meetings to try and drum up support. We also kind of had a bit of a media blackout in terms of mainstream media, which is quite common really for strike action. So we took to public forums, we took to Twitter, we took to going out where we could and organising our own pickets and speaking to members of the public, just to say, look, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, and why unfortunately you can't get your boiler repaired or, you know, serviced at the moment, and kind of apologising to members of the public, if that makes sense, to say, look, we don't want to do this, we want to be there supporting our customers, but this is what the business have led us to at this time. So working for British Gas, it is a very male-dominated environment. There aren't many women, although they are currently recruiting more at the moment, but still the percentage of female workers in the field is very low. So when I was stood on picket lines, I was the only female on many of them, other than maybe people who work for the GMB. But I would have been the only person who worked for British Gas that was female on these picket lines, so standing out like a sore thumb. But as Dani said earlier, in regards to like speaking at meetings or explaining things to management, you do get a lot of mansplaining, a lot of people trying to speak over you, which can be quite frustrating because I'm trying to, you know, put my point across and it's not deemed as worthy as maybe a male colleague, which, yeah, it's frustrating, but I'm trying to stand up and speak out where I can on things that need speaking out about. As a female rep in the workplace, I do have a lot of male colleagues that will come to me and say, you know, we've got this female worker, can you help support? Which I feel really honoured to be able to do my role, and that I am there to support female colleagues, because although there's not many of them, they still need to have that voice and have that support network within the workplace. Listening to the previous panel talking about mentors. Now, my mentor probably wouldn't even know that she's my mentor, and it would be Hazel Nolan, who works at the GMB. She was kind of the voice on our virtual rallies, our virtual picket lines, and she spoke really loud and proud, and it was just really inspirational seeing a female speaking out and speaking so passionately. Kind of feel a bit of imposter syndrome being here today. Obviously, everyone's just done such amazing things, and I've just stood on a picket line and spoke out where I can. But yeah, I don't really have much more to say other than that. Just it works when people stand together, whether you're male, female, or whatever gender you are, just stand together and speak up. It makes a difference.
Thank you so much for that, Vanessa, and thank you for the work you're doing, because, you know, the fire and rehire situation is absolutely awful. So be proud of what you're doing, own what you're doing, and thank you for being here today. Thank you to our 4 panelists. We are now going to invite people to ask questions to our panelists. If you've got questions, can you put them again in the Q&A section? So I'm going to ask Jenny for our first person who would like to raise a question, please. Thank you.
That's going to be me, because there's no questions in the question box yet. So come on, peeps, put some questions in the question and answer box, please. But I'm going to say something or ask something, and it's mostly because of what Vanessa just said, and that's that this thing that women do, which is we play ourselves down. We're imposters. We're not good enough to be here. And actually, you've all been absolutely amazing today, and you've really moved me. I feel really quite emotional about a lot of what's been said, and as Venda said, really angry about what we're having to do and why we're doing it. So I think a question is, we all sit here, we talk about imposter syndrome, but we want to encourage other women to become active. So how do we get past that? How do we start really appreciating that we have got a place around the table and we deserve that place around the table, and we are not imposters? To you all, please.
Okay, who would like to come in first for that question? Thank you, Jenny. Venda? Thank you.
Yeah, just one thing I find quite interesting. I've been a district secretary for 3 years now, and what I find with the reps that we've been able to recruit, lots of females, Black females, Asian females, and I think having a district secretary who looks like them means that they don't, you know, it's normal for them to see themselves as reps, as playing a leading role in the union. So I do think there's a lot to be said for representation in the union, and obviously in other places as well. So yeah, I always find that interesting, whereas other districts I think find it quite challenging to recruit females, and well, not necessarily females, or because the teaching profession is dominated by females, but definitely Black and ethnic minority reps as well, and members being prepared to take active roles. I haven't faced that, and I do think it helps when you've got someone at the top just making it look so normal. So I do think that that's really important. I've lost my second point, so I'll come back if that comes back to me.
That's absolutely fine. Any other panelists would like to come in on Jenny's question, please? Okay. Dani, were you going to speak then?
Yes. Sorry, Sarah said as well.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I'll take Dani first then. Thank you.
I'll just be really quick. I think to kind of give other women confidence, it is not easy. You know, we can say these things and, you know, you can do it and you've got the ability, but we do doubt ourselves more than men. And I feel that we have to work harder, and we shouldn't have to work harder. But in order to kind of come across that, you know, as if you're confident and you deserve a place at the table, is fake it. That's what I do a lot of the time. Sometimes if I'm not confident about something, I just act like I'm super confident about it. And I feel that a lot of men do that, but I think for a lot of them, it comes more naturally to men, because they've been so used to it for generations and generations, haven't they, of automatically having that seat at the table, and we have to fight harder to get to it. So in order, you know, it's easy for me to say have confidence and do it, but if you don't feel you have that confidence, try and fake it, and it will come. It will come. The more you do it, and the more you put yourself out there, and having that kind of support network as well of like Venda said, of people like you, will always give you that bit of confidence that you need. Well,
thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Dani. Sarah.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say what Dani said, fake it till you make it. I mean, it is all about support, and there's been many times where male managers within the DVLA have said to me, you don't want to be doing this union stuff, you don't need to do it anymore. And it's things like that that make me think, nah, because you said that, now I want to do it so much more. But it is definitely about leaning on the support that's there. And I've been incredibly lucky, because I took over as branch chair right as the situation in the DVLA was escalating and kind of free rolling down a hill. So it's been a massive learning curve, but it's because of the support that I've had, not from my employer, but from PCS. And, you know, the fact that my full-time officer, as I said, she's a female, that I know I can pick up the phone and ring Becky about anything, and, you know, she's there to support me and to give me confidence as well. And it's because of other women like Becky who kind of lift me up when I'm having that wobble. And that's what's important, to rely on like-minded women, but also a big thing for me to encourage females of a future generation is that I know my daughter's watching me, and I know she's hearing everything, and she's 18, so she, you know, she's just starting out in the world of work. But it's to be able to inspire another generation that's coming behind me, and I think that is also a big thing, to get women involved. You know, get your daughters, your nieces, your nephews, your friends, children doing it with you and enjoying it and becoming just as passionate as you are.
Thank you so much for that, Sarah. I have 3 more questions, one from Esther, one from Kerry, and one from Francis O'Grady. So Esther, thank you, Esther.
Hiya, wait a minute, I've got to get my glasses on. My question is really about union training and how we can support members of all unions. I'm from the CWU, but to support all members that are under 30 years of age, so we get our youth involved, because that's a big struggle. Because otherwise, we seem to be top heavy in age, and we need to get the engage younger people. And also because it's them that are going to have the big problems with pension, environment, etc., etc. And sometimes they're the most vulnerable as well. Because if you're 22 and got a family to support, that's where the union can really come and support you. So I'd like to ask the questions how we can engage about members under 30 and improve the training that they're given.
Thank you so much for that question, Esther. Vanessa, would you like to come in there? Because obviously, you know, you're the game changer with all of this. Thank you.
We do. We are currently recruiting a lot of staff within British Gas that are younger at the moment. So it is just a case of trying to get out to speak to these people and get them to understand the importance of joining a union, whichever union that may be, and explaining, you know, the benefits, not just, oh, you'll have someone to represent you if you get an allegation of something, but just, you know, to support your working rights and let them know what rights they've got at work in regards to time off for family, time off for dependents, time off for learning. So yeah, it's just about getting out there and speaking with people and getting them to understand the importance of it.
Okay, thank you. Would anybody else like to come in on that question?
Yeah, I'd like to say something. We have a young professionals officer. We have 2 or 3, and their role is specifically to talk to the young educators and to really, you know, put together socials. So they meet and they create networks because it can be a very, very lonely profession, teaching with such a you know, huge workload and just constant demands. You do end up feeling very lonely and just working yourself to the ground. And in order to kind of redress some of that, we need people to see that actually the way you push back on workload, the way you do not get burnout, and the way you are going to survive in the profession, what a sad phrase, but survive in the profession, is by creating the networks, building friendships. And this is an important part of what the union, being part of a union, does provide for you. You do feel like you're coming into a family that's going to look after you, and you can sustain, you can see a future, you know, 40 years in this career, because you feel like you've got that support network around you. So I think one of the things that young educators always tell us is, I've got too much workload, that's why I can't attend union meetings. Well, our answer to that is, you know, come in the union, and we need to, because that's exactly what the union is about. It's about pushing back on workload. And I think they really appreciate the social side of things. And they, and you know, as one of the educators said to me last week, he would have left teaching a long time ago if he didn't feel like he's part of something bigger that's pushing back and addressing all of the problems that every single you know, educator faces. But that can't be done individually, it has to be done collectively.
Thank you, Venda. I'd now like to invite Kerry to ask your question. Kerry. Are you there, Kerry?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I think my question has been answered in various ways already, but I was just really interested in Dani Harvey's speech, completely hitting the nail on everything she said there in terms of how we get women in leadership roles. So, and I know it is very complicated, like she said, but how do we begin? I mean, we can begin by teaching our own sons about equality, but how then does it, how do we then increase that encouragement of men to listen to women and think about them on equal terms? Yeah. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question, Kerry. Who'd like to address the question, please? Dani, thank you.
Yeah, Catherine, I was just thank you for the question. I was just going to address Gordon's comment in the chat where he explains to us that we should be researching the topic and identifying the issues. It's quite interesting that you assume that we haven't already done that. What we was talking about is how we come across as confident. So we do know what we're talking about when we go into these meetings, and it's how we come across as confident. And having a man explain that we don't really know what we're talking about doesn't help. So that's one of the things that I would say would help more women get involved and get into the trade union movement, because you know, people need educating, don't they? And it's the assumptions that when we talk about something, to say we're not confident about something is, you know, the assumptions that we don't know what we're talking about. And we do know what we're talking about. And especially when we're representing our other female colleagues. I had a male colleague a few months ago that tried to explain to me how we should be talking to our female colleagues and how to get them on board, how to get them to join the movement. And he's a white middle-aged male who was a senior manager. And yes, he's part of the trade union movement, but he was telling me how we get, how do we tell him, trying to explain to me how we get these young, lower grade, just starting out in the civil service women to join us. And you know, I just think why would you think that was a good idea, to try and explain to a woman what other women are thinking? So yes, it's educating our daughters and it's educating our sons, but it is trying to get those other people on board as well, that we are not your enemy. We don't hate men. We just think that we deserve a seat at the table just as much as you. And yes, we know what we're talking about, and we don't necessarily need your advice. But I don't know whether that answered the question. I went into a bit of a rant there, so sorry.
Okay, it's allowed. Right, okay. Anybody else would like to address that question, or shall I bring Francis in? Okay, thank you. Francis, you've got a question to ask the panelists, please.
Yeah, thank you. You've all played key roles in disputes and organising. Is there anything that you would have done differently, a lesson that you can pass on, you know, with the benefit of hindsight? Is there anything you would have done differently? What are you most personally proud of? Was there something that, you know, a personal barrier you had to break through and you feel proud that you did something that maybe a few years back you'd have thought twice about? And is there, sorry, 3 questions in one, is there a key message you would send to the TUC or perhaps your own General Secretary about how your union and the wider union movement can better support women at the forefront of battles like these?
Thank you, Frances. Thank you so much for that question. Sarah?
Thank you. I mean, it's been quite a steep learning curve, the entire dispute with the DVLA, and I think when it's all over and we reflect on the entire process, there probably will be a lot of things that we would have done differently. But personally, from my point of view, would have been to not pay as much attention as I did to the doubters. And you know, this answer is more personal rather than about the dispute in the branch. But when I took over as interim branch chair, I received a lot of hate and backlash for that. And I really did allow it to question me, and I thought, you know, should I now put myself forward for election into this role and carry on with it? And I spent too much time reflecting on what they were saying, and that is something that I feel a little bit disappointed in myself with, because it kind of tainted my initial experience of standing in to the role. But the fact that I did decide to go forward for it and then got elected into the role is probably one of the proudest moments that I've had in my working career, because, you know, you put yourself up there when you're open to criticism, when you do step forward for things like this, and it's not easy to just let it by the wayside. And in recent weeks as well, there's been a pretty awful hate campaign against me as an individual and within my role. And looking back, if it wasn't for the hate that I had at the start, I think what's happening now would have had an even bigger impact on me, where I probably would have questioned carrying on in the role that I did. So it has built me a little bit, made me stronger a little bit to the criticism. But I think I'd have to say never to take anything personally, because yeah, you read the comments and it hurts when you read them. And, you know, I've even had some pretty bad threats made against me and the effect that has on my family. So but again, it goes back to the support, and I'm lucky that I've got that. And any key message to Max Watka in our case, who's our General Secretary, would be just keep doing what you're doing, because, you know, it's the way he's handling the whole dispute, and even the personal touches that he's put along the way have meant more than anything. But we've also got a fantastic female leader in Fran Heathcote, who again is the support there as well. And I think that's what people need to realise. And perhaps key messages would be, just because somebody is in a position of power, like the job, not even power as such, then in a senior position such as the General Secretary or the President of the Union, they're still human beings, and they're still people, they're still approachable. And that is something that I've definitely learned, because the reputation between the branch and the National Union in the DVLA hasn't always been a very good relationship, and we've now come full circle. And I did think at the start when I went to them for help that, yeah, they're not going to want to come and they're not going to want to support us because of what had happened in years gone by. But it definitely has. So a key message would be just, you know, keep doing what you're doing at the top, because you're doing a fantastic job. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Sarah. Vanessa, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, I just wanted to answer the one about, like, what are we proudest of personally. So for me, it would be able to come on things like this, being able to speak at the People's Assembly, being able to speak at picket lines, and not be seen as different for being a female, and being able to speak in front of a picket line full of males, and, you know, just being able to build that confidence. I feel it's really built my confidence, being able to speak out about the issues that we've faced at British Gas.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Vanessa. Venda.
Proudest, I would say, I'm really proud of how diverse our district is. We fight, you know, we fight tooth and nail for, you know, bread and butter issues, but we also put equality right at the top. So, you know, we think about who's going to be our speakers, and championing equality issues is really at the forefront of what we do, because you know, if we're fighting oppression and inequality, then I think addressing inequality has to be at the heart of what we do. So yeah, I'm incredibly proud at how diverse our branch is, and how there is contribution and involvement from various groups within the branch. In terms of what I would learn from disputes, what I would do differently. So we've got one dispute which we won and a dispute that's ongoing. What I learned from the first dispute is it's not my dispute, you know, as an officer, as a lay officer, it's not my dispute. The dispute is the strikers' dispute. So it's about passing that over to them, letting them feel in charge. And so they feel like they're the ones, and it is true, it is, they're the ones who are making changes to their working lives. So it's allowing the strikers to feel much more ownership of the strike, the direction the strike takes. And I've, I think I've kind of held on quite tightly to strikes and how that's organised and how that's shaped and how the strategy that goes in. I've learnt that actually giving the strikers more involvement in that is so much more empowering, and that's how it should be, because it's their fight. So yeah, that's something that I will take forward with me in future strike action.
Thank you, Venda. Dani.
In terms of campaigns, I think I will leave that to our capable lay officers like Sarah, because they are leading the campaigns. And as a full-time officer, that's what we want. We want the lay officers leading and being the face of it, and the members. We want it very much lay-led. But in terms of other kind of campaigns, I mean, I'm most proud of our women's network. So, I mean, we put a call out for women activists, and within hours, we just had them flooding in. And straight away, they started talking with each other. They've come up with ideas, campaign ideas, things that affect women in the workplace. And they're really starting to move on those issues. So that's something that I'm really proud of. But in terms of striking and things, I will take a step back and let our lay reps lead on that.
Thank you so much for those answers. Before we look at our final videos, I'd like to thank all the delegates for attending. I'd like to thank all of our panellists, this morning's panellists, this afternoon's panellists. I'd also like to thank Midlands TUC, and especially to Rob, Michelle, Lee and Jenny, because I don't know what I'd do without Jenny. If you wish to learn more about the Women's Chainmakers, or you want to get involved with the work of the TUC or the important work of the Chainmakers, please contact Midlands TUC or the Friends of the Women's Chainmakers. And we really look forward to seeing you at a face-to-face festival next year, because I'd never heard what Zoom was, a year and a half ago. So I'm hoping to see you all in the flesh next year. That would be fabulous. So to end this wonderful Chainmakers conference, we're now going to hear the words of Mary Macarthur as Sheila Chamberlain Highland reenacts the victory speech from 1910. This will be followed on from another short video from Sheila, who shares the passion for the story of the women Chainmakers. Thank you all for attending. Stay safe, stay kind, and look after yourselves. Thank you. Take care.
Today, the 22nd of October 1910, marks the day of victory for the women chainmakers of Cradley Heath. I can now report to you that yesterday at Grangers Lane School, the vast majority of your employers have signed the whitelist, the list of manufacturers who will pay the new rates. Today you can hold your heads up high and be assured of the dignity of your worth. But to the manufacturers and employers I say this is no defeat. Indeed, this is the day on which we all move forward to a fairer, more civilised world, in which those of us with more give back to those who have little. And this struggle has not been without its sacrifices. Those women who've risked their livelihoods through their strike action, you will go down in history as the Cradley women who rose up against poverty wages for sweated labour. I sincerely hope that your story is kept alive in the Black Country and beyond for many generations to come. Women of all ages have played their parts in this victory, from the fresh-faced young girls just beginning their apprenticeships to the oldest striker of them all. 79-year-old Mrs. Patience Round. 67 years she has stood at her forge, rising at 4 a.m. each morning and finishing work as the light fades. And in her lifetime, making over 3 1,000 miles of chain by hand. And in all those 67 years, she has only ever taken 2 days off in a row. Let me quote you her exact words. "These are wonderful times," she said. "I never thought I should live to assert the rights of us women. But now is the time to build on your strength, women of Cradley. Unity is strength and union is strength. A trade union is like a bundle of sticks. The workers are bound together and have the strength of unity. The woman who is not in a union is like a single stick. She can be easily broken or bent to the will of her employer. Remember, an employer can do without one worker. He cannot do without them all. And this you've proved through your strike action. But this is just the first step, ladies. Who knows what you can go forward and achieve as women workers? My work here is almost at an end. You no longer need a Mary Macarthur to lead you in your marches. You are finding your own leaders and your own voices. But even on this day of victory, let us remind ourselves, that which is so hard won is so easily lost. And we all know too well, a woman's work is never done. A fond farewell to you all. Since being involved in the very first Chainmakers Festival, I have found the story fascinating. Both the point of view of the women chainmakers who risked their livelihood to fight for the minimum wage, and from those involved in leading the strike like Mary Macarthur and Julia Varley. I've been a miniaturist now for probably well over 10 years and decided to attempt to tell part of the story in 12th scale. This is the chain shop of Patience Round, the oldest lady who took part in the strike, and she's being visited by Mary Macarthur. The figure of Mary was very kindly made by a lady called Caroline Nix from Woodside Dolls, and we decided to base her outfit on one that is actually in pictures of Mary in 1908 when she led the Corriganza box factory strike. Now, when it came to making the tools for the chain shop, that was a different matter altogether. Going to miniaturist fairs and dolls house exhibitions and telling people that you were making a chain shop, you were greeted by blank expressions. Very few people did models of tools and things like that. So I've had to hand make a lot of the tools that Patience is using in her forge, as well as the bellows, which were measured from a full scale, real life bellows, human sized, and I sort of shrank it down to 12th scale for the tiny chain shop. And I'm hoping with this model to show the very difficult lives that those women chain makers led.